when Mary Catherine was in remission, she loved helping people. I mean, there was a point when she was in remission out in California where she was serving food to the homeless 2 or 3 times a week, and she and a group of friends would make the lunches. They would write Bible verses on the bags, and then they would go into a part of San Diego where there were, homeless people would come knowing that they would get food. She got people to donate clothing so that they could bring the clothing down there and not only give out lunches, but clothing as well. And I think the thing that I was the most proud of her for was actually getting out and talking to people who were homeless, because it's one thing, well, it's a great thing to do anything for people that are less fortunate, but it's one thing to help them, and it's another thing to help them and relate to them the way you relate to anyone else. And she was able to do that. She had one friend that she made that she would go and visit all the time, and I think he even actually came to a service, a memorial service for her that was given in San Diego. But she was a totally different person in recovery than she was in her active addiction, because she was in control of her own life. She could do the things that she wanted to do. She could work a job. She could, and she did. Before she relapsed, the last 7 months that she had sober, before she relapsed, she was working a part-time job. She was going to meetings. She was sponsoring people. She had a car. She had a steady boyfriend. She had, her life was totally different than it was in addiction. In addiction, she couldn't hold down a job. She couldn't stay in a relationship. She was in and out of fender benders. So yeah, that was.
We lived in a part of Atlanta, north suburban Atlanta, Alpharetta, Roswell, Dunwoody. It's called the drug triangle now because so many kids died from this affluent area. First of all, it's huge. It's a part of suburban Atlanta, and it's over 1 million people. But she would literally go to a funeral there for a while every week, it seemed like, of somebody in her extended network who would die of an overdose. So this didn't catch her totally by surprise. I mean, she knew how deadly this was, and she went to enough funerals. And I'll never forget Marcia and I were at the theater in Denver, and the play was over, and I got a phone call, and I remember thinking, this phone's gonna ring one time, I'm gonna find out my daughter is dead. And I remember looking at it, and it was from the Orange County Police Department. I knew what that call was, because I knew she was out in California. And I got the phone call that my daughter had overdosed and that she was dead. And I remember never wanting to touch that phone again. It was just that, it transferred some of that negative energy to the phone. And then I remember seeing her in the morgue, and this beautiful girl, and she didn't look, she looked like Mary Catherine, but she was motionless and she was cold. I remember when I felt her and she was cold, it was just sickening. The feeling of a child and that amount of suffering that led up to it, it really was like a disease in that regard, and that there was a long period of suffering and it ended up with death. And that's what we experience with this horrible disease and this horrible opioid epidemic that's going on.